Chapter 51. The palace is not completely organized yet. It wasn't enough because it was prepared in a hurry, Prince. Kylus apologized, unable to lift his head as if he had no face. From dinner, I'll prepare properly. I'm sorry, Prince. Even Caitlin, who packed tableware alone, did not look good because she didn't like Perez's first meal at Poirac Palace to be like this. Perez was still standing in front of a stone tablet in the garden with an unfamiliar face. I was looking at the flowers in the garden and I was worried at the moment. Still, it's the first meal Perez has at his own new palace, but how would you feel if the food brought was below standard? No matter how dull he is, he would be very disappointed. Besides, it was Kylus who went inside the Poirac Palace, which is still being organized, and brought a meal. It's a big deal if I'm disappointed with Kylus, who will have to care for Perez right by his side in the future. What is so messed about? I stopped doing and ran straight to the table. By the way, what? I was honestly surprised. It wasn't because the meal on the table was too messy. Rather, I was surprised that it was too much bread. However, Kylus and Caitlin's thoughts seemed different. I'm more sorry for my reaction, and I can see it with my head down. I'm sorry, my lady, if you don't like it too much. Once you're eating this food, we'll go to the Imperial Palace and bring more proper food. Looking at the expressions of the two, this wasn't a joke, it was sincere. It's much better than I thought. Isn't that Perez? When I asked him, Perez nodded a little. The lunch Kylus prepares is a sandwich topped with red jam, a salad with lots of fresh fruit, a grilled chicken dish in a sweet sauce, and roasted vegetables cooked together and freshly prepared hot steam. It's full of bread. I don't know what it tastes like yet, but this was a great appetizer for lunch. Even at Lombardi's mansions, of course, there are times when I get a more fancy lunch, but when I ate alone, most of the meals were simple and affordable. I just wanted to ask Kylus, is Your Majesty's lunch much larger than this table setting? Kylus nodded firmly and replied, Your Majesty eats all 3 meals a day in a prepared dinner course. Each time, 3 or more main dishes are prepared to suit his taste, and 4 or more especially before and after meals. I can eat all of them. Did you choose the food His Majesty usually likes among them? Yes, that's right. Wow, my house was a lot frugal. Of course, Grandpa hates wasteful food, so naturally, Lombardi's chef cooks a small amount of food with all his heart. Other members of the family are all accustomed to the way they eat. I asked because I wanted to. How about the first prince? When the word of first prince came out, Perez, who couldn't take her eyes off at the prepared food, turned to me. Are you still aware of the competition? The face of the guy looking at me was harder than usual. As far as I know, at the order of Her Majesty Empress, magnificent dinners are prepared each meal. But since he is still young, there must be a lot of wasted food. She said that because he's growing up, we need to pay more attention to his meals. I heard and knew the Empress' love for her son, but it was truly unusual. I sat down while shaking my head. Perez also looked at me, and I took a seat in the chair that Kylus had prepared. I grabbed my fork and knife and rushed towards the chicken dish. There were other pre-dinner foods like salads and sandwiches, but the first one is meat. When I cut the softly cooked chicken and put it in my mouth, I felt a wonderful balance of taste in my mouth. This wasn't bad. 1 piece of meat, 2 salads, and then open the bread before a meal, and after that a large bite with plenty of butter. I'm having such an exciting meal, and Kylus, who stands behind Perez's chair across from me, doesn't look good. I looked at Perez. Why not eat? Perez held a fork in one hand, just staring at the food. You don't like the food? The guy shook his head. Then don't you know what to eat first? He shook his head again. Well, maybe. Are you scared of food? Huh. The answering voice is small, but it must have been heard from Kylus and Caitlin's side standing next to us. Caitlin squeezed her lower lip because she knew the reason, and Kylus tilted his head because he couldn't understand. Then they brought a plate of chicken in front of Perez. After dividing it into pieces to make it easier to eat, I cooked one of them and put it in my mouth. Ah, surprised, Perez screamed quietly. However, I looked at Perez straight ahead and chewed the food from more tightly. Okay. Don't do that in the future. It's dangerous. Why? Maybe the food you eat is poisonous? The guy nodded. Only then Kylus looked upset about the reason for Perez's action. It wasn't because the new person was suspicious of himself. He just realized the reason why this little child had such fear. I said while putting the plate back in front of Perez, Don't worry about that. In the future, Caitlin and Kylus are people you can trust. They're people from Lombardy that our grandfather sent to protect you. However, he still hesitated. I know the heart. When his mother fell ill and died, there was no one to help. And after that, even he was left alone, eating the poisonous food that the maid brought him once every few days. Now, if someone else comes up and says he will take good care of you in the future, you can't believe it, right? But don't refuse food. Do you believe me? I do. It was a quick answer that could not be compared to before. Then why don't you give these 2 people a chance? Perez raised his red eyes and looked at Kylus and Caitlin. What are you seeing? After staring at the 2 for a long time, Perez raised the fork again, and carefully he put the chicken I had cut into his mouth. Ah, from the back I heard Kylus' relief. Is it delicious? Oh, my lips moved faster and faster. Then after that, I put the warm bread before the meal, and then the jam, applied sandwich without hesitation. It was a messy dining etiquette for the prince to see, but no one pointed it out. For that, the appearance of Perez, who seemed to have eaten in a long time, was very desperate. I said, and pushing the sandwich in front of him, "Don't mind what you want to eat in the future. You don't have to be afraid anymore." The guy, mindlessly taking food to his mouth, stopped moving. Then, after a while, he nods his head once. The face of the guy who started eating silently again was a little brighter than before. I felt like he was enjoying the taste of the food. I, too, began to eat slowly next to Perez. When lunch was over, he ate over 3 servings by himself. Caitlin and Kylie smiled happily while looking at Perez's reaction of patting the stomach to see if it was hard. Soon after, the empty plate was removed and a simple refreshment was prepared on the table. After a meal that has never been eaten before, Perez suddenly asks Caitlin for tea and a sumptuous dessert. Is the first prince in living like this? Neither Caitlin nor Kylos, who was smiling, couldn't answer. Are you living in such a comfortable way for the first time? But Perez did not rush to answer the two. Without touching the teaware, I just kept looking at something reflected in the clear tea water. I couldn't find anything I could say this time either. After a while, by the time the tea water had cooled down, a voice was heard looking for me. "Florentia, Grandpa!" I got off the chair where I was sitting and ran to my grandfather, said the grandfather who patted my head when I ran. "Now let's go back home, Florentia. Your father must be worried a lot. If I'm father, I may not even go to work and may be waiting for me at home." The imperial palace was a very reluctant and tense place for my father, and since my grandfather and I go to such a place, he couldn't be comfortable. Then grandfather approached Perez. "Sooner or later, teachers will come to teach you. Learn hard. Yeah, academic and swordsmanship should not be neglected either. Yeah, the relationship between Grandpa and Perez is drier than I thought. Perez didn't even see my grandfather's face properly, and he treated Perez with a different cold attitude than when he treated me. I helped by pulling my grandfather's hand. "Grandpa, Perez is so smart. He read herbal books on his own, and he was very good at swordsmanship." "Is that so?" "Yes, so Perez will do well. The new teachers may be surprised because he's good at studying and good at swordsmanship too. Not only did he use his head, but he was different from Prince Astana, who had no spiritual talent for swordsmanship. Perez already has a different blood. He's the guy who showed such a tremendous appearance in his previous life, who was as big as a wild dog left alone in the forest in a separate palace. Now, how great would Perez be if the great teachers picked up by my grandfather to teach him?" Just thinking about it made me all tremble. Moreover, I was very excited about the distorted faces of the Empress and Astana. "Is that right, Perez?" "Huh?" Perez replied, blinking her eyes slowly. "I will do my best. The future of a genius who strives is inevitably bright." I approached Perez and greeted him, patting his head. "I'll write you a letter. See you next time. It's time to say goodbye. He will be able to grow up safely, at least for the time being, until he goes to an academy where he will grow up and meet his people, safe in a much better environment than before. And if I exchange letters from time to time, at least Perez will not forget me." I reached out one hand to shake my hand. "Goodbye, Perez. Eat well and grow up." Shit. He pulled my hand out and hugged me tightly. "Don't say goodbye." What? Goodbye? Don't tell me that." "Oh, I see then. However, what should I say?" I thought while pushing him a little. The man who hugged me as if he would never let go of me. I gently pushed him out of my hand. "Right, that's what I should say," I said while looking at Perez with his gloomy eyes. "See you again, Perez." His face bloomed in an instant. A dent on the cheek and the hidden dimple came out, and the tail of the mouth, which had always spoken gloomy words, rose slightly. There was also something like joy in his red eyes that was empty of emotion. He replied with a face that looked like a small rosebud that had just emerged. "Yes, see you again." On the way out of Matriarch Palace, I'm holding my grandfather's hand, and that night, after bathing in warm water with soft foam, I lie in my bed and put my head on a fluffy pillow. Looking back now, his smile has remained in my mind for quite some time, like a strong rose scent that I have never smelled before. End of chapter 51. End of chapter 51. Chapter 52. To Florentia. "How are you? I think I'm used to the new palace now, because in the east the sun shines well. Perhaps that is why there are so many good herbs. Yesterday, while walking, I found a bunch of bomnia flowers. I could recognize that it was a flower that bloomed a lot in the place where I lived before. Bomnia flower will bloom soon. It is a red flower with beautiful petals. If bomnia flower blooms, can I send it to you? The swordsmanship class starts tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. I had my first fruit sandwich yesterday. The white cream was sweet and delicious, but not as much as the candy you gave me. Tomorrow, Kylos told the chef to make chocolate cookies, but it doesn't look as good as the one I had with you, so I'm not expecting much. If it's okay, send me a reply. If you don't like it, you don't have to really. See you again. From Perez. P.S. I think you will also like the momnia flowers. To Perez, I'm sorry for answering late. I've been a little busy these days. The horses my dad bought for my birthday have arrived, so I was busy taking care of them. They are very meek and pretty children. I named the mother Bailey and her baby Blanc. It's the first time I've ever heard of a flower called Bomnia flowers. I'll be looking forward to a flower gift. How are you? From Florentia. P.S. Why don't you stop eating grass now? To Florentia. Finally, the Bomnia flowers bloomed. Autumn came slowly this year, and it seems to have bloomed late. I looked for a book, but the original Bomnia flowers are wildflowers that grow only in the southern part of the empire. Perhaps someone who misses his hometown secretly planted it in the imperial palace. I'll send the petals of Bomnia flowers to Caitlin. I'm not eating grass anymore. Something weird happened today. During the swordsmanship class, I came up with a thing called aurora, but the floor is broken. Of course, I was so surprised, especially the swordsman's reaction was weird. After that, I made an aura several times and then went back. And in the evening, His Majesty the Emperor came to my palace. It was my first time seeing him in person, but we really don't resemble him at all. But His Majesty the Emperor laughed that my talent resembled him. How about Bailey and Blank? Doesn't it bother you? I hope so, because you shouldn't be overworked. See you again. From Perez. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. To Perez. Happy 13th birthday. I wanted to give you a new sword as a birthday present. There was a limit for Caitlin to carry it out secretly, so it was impossible. So I'll send you some gold coins and the ruby brooch. This is I picked it up while passing by. Anyway, happy birthday from Florentia. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. To Florentia. I wore the ruby brooch you gave me last month to dinner. I couldn't eat properly because the Empress stared at me, but I felt good. On your 10th birthday, I heard from Caitlin that the vipache I presented to you had an accident with your beloved Bailey. On behalf of vipache, I apologize. Maybe horse name. By any chance when we can meet again? No other reason because the last time I saw you were already 2 years and 6 months ago. When I can see you again. From Perez. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. To Perez. If I see good ruby jewelry in the future, I will present it to you. The Empress is angry. I feel good. And don't worry about Bailey's. It's a happy thing for Bailey and Blank to have a new family. Vipache is doing a great job of being a good father. And that's how time has already passed since we exchanged letters. Did you ask when I can meet you? We will meet soon, maybe faster than you think. I will see you soon. From Florentia. Tia, what are you doing? Anyway, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Tia, what are you doing? I heard a voice calling me when I just put the pen down and raised my head. I entered the study, a light brown-haired woman. Close to the wet collar, took off her coat and smiled at me. Oh, Laurel, did you come early today? Laurel is a horse companion and a maid employed by my father when I was 10 years old. She's kind and have a bright personality and turned 19 this year. Can you give me a room in the mansion? It's very troublesome to travel, miss. No, if you don't go home, Mrs. Dillard is sad, right? She is the youngest daughter of the Dillard couple and the famous princess who is difficult to approach. I am worried because I'm the youngest. I have a lot of age difference from the 3 older brothers. My mother also told me to find a good groom now. I also want to have a relationship, but did you write a troubling letter because there was no man around? Laurel approached me and naturally asked, sitting next to me. I used that good stationery only once. At first, I used any paper. Over time, Perez used good paper. The other person uses good paper, but I can't properly write it down behind the exercise paper. I am inevitably writing a good letterhead. Come to think of it, it was already almost 3 years ago Perez moved to Poirac Palace. In the meantime, I am now 10 years old and Perez is 13 after his birthday a while ago. I've never seen his face in person again, but every time Caitlin came to the mansion, he occasionally asked hello in a letter. Who is the recipient? I can't tell you yet. You know, it is not yet to be known that I am the person who is sending and receiving letters with Perez, Lombardi, and Angenes. It is not the time to intervene in the power battle between the first and second princess. When I put my folded letterhead in an envelope and handed it to Laurel, she used wax and sealed it. Will you tell me later? Yes, later. Laurel was a little disappointed but soon forgot about the letter and watered the flower pot with a joyful face. How do you say the name of this flower, miss? Bomnia flowers. That's right, Bomnia flowers. It's a pretty flower. It's a pity that I can only see it for a few days in autumn. That's why it's become prettier. Laurel stopped watering and said, Sometimes miss speaks prematurely for your true age. I am a little smart, that's why. Oh yes, if I think of your cousins, no one is smarter than you. That's a natural word. Laurel, with her 2 sleeves rolled up, opened both windows for ventilation. If it were the famous daughter of the Dillard family, I wouldn't have to work separately. Looking at her volunteer work for my maid, it seems that Laurel is not usually a unique personality. Because you're so smart, you know. Clairvan's brother also decided to become your exclusive teacher. Not long after becoming my person, Clairvan announced that he would resign from his successor education job and become my exclusive teacher. But thanks to that, the family was in a riot. How exciting is it when I remember that time? When I think of Sarah's face, who said she couldn't believe it, I still laugh after several years. Tuk tuk, the library door opened with a polite knock. It was Clairvan. Brother! Laurel, who was clearing the curtains, ran toward Clairvan. Hello, Dillard young lady. However, Clairvan took half a step back and treated Laurel like dealing with a stranger. Sigh, when will you treat me as your sister? No one is here anyway. Laurel scowled and said, Laurel, who heard about Clairvan's existence from his father when she reached adulthood, was happy to see Clairvan. I don't use the last name Dillard. But why did you call me brother? If your real brother hear it, he will be very disappointed. Brother used the formal call Oraboni. You are too much, really. Laurel shook his shoulders. grimly and went outside. When Clarivan comes and the class begins, Laurel can't enter my library. Clarivan's eyes captured the back of Laurel disappearing out of the door for quite a long time. Looking at that, it doesn't seem like Laurel is completely a stranger to Clarivan. However, I didn't talk about it because I could understand a little bit of the heart that was born and raised as an illegitimate child. Soon, Clarivan sat down and the report continued. The performance of children's clothing, which started, as Smith said, was great. The reaction was fast like when we first launched men's clothing here. Clarivan gave me a well-organized report. Indeed, it was worth noting that Clarivan Pallet was a genius. When he first started the ready-to-wear business, he made a few mistakes, but he never made the same mistake over and over again. And now, almost 3 years later, the Galyahan clothing stores were spreading throughout the empire. The nobles in the neighborhood, who learned of the ready-made clothes system that successfully settled in Lombardy, struggled with each other and asked for a branch of clothing stores in their estates. Of course, there was a reason behind that my father was the son of Lulac Lombardi, and that the portion of the profits generated from the clothing store was paid to the lord in a tax form. As a result, none of the commoners who wore good quality clothes at low prices don't know the name of Galyahan. It has also been said that the health of the commoners who now wear clean and seasonal clothes has improved very much. In short, my father has become very, very rich in almost 3 years. And because of the children's clothing line launched just a while ago, he is going to become even more wealthy. After receiving all the reports of the clothing store, I said to Clarivan, who stood up and packed his luggage, "Clarivan, get ready to write your resignation soon." End of chapter 52. Chapter 53. Yes. The Clarivan's handsome face became pale. The tall body staggered once, then leaned back against the back of the sofa and asked me with a look as if the world was over. Did I make a mistake? Obviously, you misunderstood my words. You would even cry soon. I heard that Clarivan's nickname is called Handsome. Where on earth is that face? Pretending not to know, I said a little bit late to make fun of Clarivan. What extent do you expect, Clarivan? Clarivan rubbed his messy face. If this continues, he will cry, I said with a playful laugh. No, not the clothing store. Are you ready to resign from my grandfather? Oh, then. Joy passes on Clarivan's face, who understands what I mean. I smiled and answered. My 11th birthday is coming. I have to get ready. The day I am free is not long. Of course, there is one hurdle to overcome before that. A flower of laughter bloomed on Clarivan's face, looking at me. And this, could you pass it on to Caitlin? Probably now she will be in my grandfather's office. I just handed out a letter envelope sealed by Laurel to Clarivan. Clarivan nodded. Looks like he knows who this was written for. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Matriarch Palace Training Ground. Perez, standing with his sword in a well-organized posture, spacious space, closed his eyes and felt the wind. Although his black hair and collar were fluttering in the wind, the tall, slender boy remained unshakable. He just stands quietly with a beautiful face like a masterpiece. The teaching method of the swordsmanship teacher attached by the Lombardy lord was slightly different from the other knights. In addition, it does not apply the law to make loud noises and does not teach students carelessly. Rather, Perez spent much of his class meditating like this. A little while ago, I was trying to reconsider his teacher with the teacher in my mind. Perez was a hard-working guy that wasn't innately talented. Sometimes, the swordsmanship class is forced to stop, but today it was a little different. Perez's swordsmanship teacher, Juves, looked strangely at the disciple who could not concentrate on the class. From a teaching standpoint, a student who absorbs everything at such a fast pace sometimes gets distracted like this. It was because he saw Perez every day like that. In the end, Juves said with a small sigh, "Enough for today, Your Majesty." For someone who can't concentrate on the movement of the wind, Perez stubbornly closed his eyes and shook his head. "I'll do more." It has been almost 3 years since he has regained his rightful position as a prince. Now it's okay to live a little more comfortably. The appearance of the second prince, who is still enthusiastic about swordsmanship and study, to the extent that obsessive compulsiveness is suspected, made the observer a little worried. Juves wanted it to be good. In the meantime, Perez hadn't taken a single day off the swordsmanship class, so Juves thought he should make the first prince take a rest. You keep losing your concentration and composure, but only imitating is useless. I'm going to lower the sword. In the end, Perez slowly opened his eyes. Through the dark hair blowing in the wind, eyes brighter than ruby appeared. Perez, who is 13 years old now, is a boy, standing there with a very beautiful appearance. Sometimes it was too much, and the reality was degraded. But Juves, who had been through Perez very closely, knew that this beautiful boy was actually a man who lacked so much. There was almost no joy or sorrow that any person would have. Even if there was, it was faint. When Perez expressed his emotional expression, it was only when he occasionally eats around candy or when he looks at the blooming bomnia flowers. Even when deliberately pushing strength training to its limits, Perez was silent. Regarding that, he even heard that even in academic class, his attitude was the same. Despite the incredible speed of growth, Juves are worried about where the second prince's blindness is coming from. So today, Juves took the initiative to ask about what was bothering Perez. "Is there someone you are waiting for?" Juves asked, while remembered Perez gazed toward the entrance of the palace. "Yeah," replied Perez in a small flinch. "Who are you waiting for?" "Waiting for Caitlin to return home." "Why?" "I can't tell you." Perez, who had always been telling the truth, refused to answer in the first place. As if hiding the most precious secret in the world, his young lips were stubbornly closed. Juves even felt a sense of betrayal. "Please tell me." No, Your Majesty. I said no. Perez was even vigilant now. Are you refused to answer your teacher, so I will punish you. Do 1,000 cuts up and down. Yeah. Now Juves has lost his words. Rather than telling the reason for waiting for Caitlin, Paris going to do 1,000 cuts. Juves shook his head. Soon at the training hall, there was nothing but the sound of Paris' harsh breath. Home, home. Around 500 times like that, Juves said to Paris, who had become sweaty, I don't know for what reason, but I'm very worried about your majesty. Home, home. Just as understanding and inclusion in other people are important, it is also important to have a generous attitude toward oneself. Home, home. Your Majesty, who may have watched lacks those points. It doesn't have to be perfect in every way. People don't know. It was weird. He couldn't hear the sound of the sword breaking the wind anymore. Juve's eyes turned puzzled and saw Perez already running at full speed from there, with the sword in one hand and the scabbard in the other. It was the profile of someone running towards something like a crazy man. Well, Your Majesty, it was the first time how Perez lost his composure like that. No, the bright eyes that reminded me of the red ruby a little while ago showed even something like madness at first glance. And on the side where Perez was running, there was a wagon that had just entered Poirec Palace. Jules felt unreasonable and just stood there watching him. Perez, who ran to the entrance and stood in front of the carriage, could not remain still even in the short moment when the footrest was placed on the carriage door opened. He quickly put his sword in the scabbard and rubbed his hands, covered with dirt and sweat, on his stretched pants. Finally, the carriage door opened, and Caitlin, the maid of the Poirec Palace, stepped out on the ground lightly. And when she found Perez standing in front of her, she laughed while spreading and took something out of her handbag and handed it over. Letter? It was definitely a small pink envelope, and the smile, though lightly, spreads on the face of Perez, who received it. Red lips draw a nice line and sharp eyes are curved. It was a clear smile. Huh. Jules laughed unwittingly at Perez's smile for the first time. Who in the world wouldn't saw a pure boy or didn't know what to do with that joy? Perez was standing still for a while. Then he grabbed the letter and ran into the palace, with the sword always thrown away from the body. Jules, seeing the sword lying on the floor, muttered bleakly, well, if it's fortunate, that's fortunate. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Miss, can't I sleep here today? No. Why? There are so many rooms left. Why do you leave a good house and sleep in someone else's house? Go back quickly. Hey, young miss, you're too much. L'Oreal lowered her shoulders and pouting her lips. But it doesn't work for me. When I remember the last time I let her stay without thinking, and finally I had to listen to L'Oreal's chat until I fell asleep, I trembled without even knowing. Hey, then I'll come early tomorrow. L'Oreal, who said so, nodded to me and went outside. I'm on a holiday tomorrow, do you know? But once I tell you, you might actually be sleeping here. I lay down on the sofa in the living room alone to enjoy the tranquility that finally came. The day was very easy that thanks to L'Oreal's help, but sometimes I need time to be alone. I relaxedly closed my eyes. However, the stillness did not last long. Bang! The door opened with a loud sound. L'Oreal, what else did you leave, Dad? It was my father, who was holding the door handle and breathing. I was amazed and sat up. Tia! My father staggers when he calls my name. Then he stopped in front of the sofa where I was sitting and fell to his knees. My father's face, whose eye level was similar to mine, was crying. Ah, Dad, Dad. My father, who had been happily a few times, said the next word. Your dad getting a medal. End of chapter 53. Chapter 54. Wow, the founding medal? Yup, the Imperial Palace sent someone to the clothing store. Each year, on the day of its founding, the Emperor confers a medal. It's up to the Emperor to who the medal will be given. Some of the successive emperors gave medals to their son, the prince. The contents of the medal were also varied, in some cases given to the people, and in some cases one of the royal relatives was greatly awarded. I made ready-to-wear clothes to help improve the health of the imperial people. He still couldn't believe it. He muttered and pinching my cheek. That is the best. I kissed my dad's cheek and made him happier. In fact, I already knew. The fact that the recipient of this year's founding medal is my father. It was because Emperor Jovanes had already conveyed his intentions to my grandfather 3 months ago, and Clarivan had told me that. I didn't write to Paris that I'll see him sooner or later. Moreover, this year's banquet was expected to be even more special. Clarivan brought this news that the extended family, or who presided over each area, had arrived in the capital to attend the banquet. South Susu, East Luman, West Huxley, and North Ivan. Of all the imperial banquets that have been held in the past few decades, was there any banquet as magnificent as this time and was attended by many valued guests? Because they told me to attend the banquet in 3 days. What should I prepare? My father is still mithering and choosing my clothes first. It's not me, my father, who wins the award. But it's not me, but my father who wins the award. I'm going to wear the clothes at the Galleon clothing store. My father was surprised at what I cried out, and his eyes widened. But Tia, the clothes is the clothing store. My father was silent for a while. It's a little bit to wear to the Imperial Palace banquet. How about wearing the clothes that Aunt Janet gave us as a gift? This time, it seemed that he was worried that I will be teased after going to the Imperial Palace in a ready-to-wear clothes. In a way, it was a natural concern. Ready-made clothes were common people's clothes. I could tell from seeing my father receive a medal for making ready-made clothes for them, who were always naked and cold, but he couldn't resist my stubbornness. I'm going to wear the clothes that my dad made. Tia. My father hugged me tightly. It seemed that he was moved by my extreme innocence. Thank you, Tia. My father patted my back at the end of his crying voice. Whose daughter will be so pretty? I also hugged my father tightly. I feel good, so I laughed. The Imperial Palace banquet, it's a great opportunity to promote children's clothing. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Your Majesty is waiting, the Emperor's chief butler said quietly to Paris when he approached. It's an early time when the sun has barely reached. Jovane called Paris about once a month to eat breakfast with him. Others looked at it and seemed to say, Your Majesty cares very much for the second prince, but well, Paris thought this was rather close to surveillance. He checked to see if the second prince, who was reluctant to gather, was sternly minded. Upon entering, the Emperor was already eating. Without common greeting, Jovane didn't stop eating, confirming that Paris had come with a side glance. Paris, too, took a seat and sat down one place away. Before long, the food was prepared with the same excellent food that the Emperor eats. Looking back at it, Paris recalled the day he first entered the Portrait Palace, when he was getting used to moldy food, and that the day he first learned what a prince-like meal was. That day when the sun went down, the candles were lit, and the wall torch was lit all night, and he realized how warm the night was, on the day when anger was hotter than the burning fire. The only thing that made Paris laugh in the memory of that day was Florentia. I heard that the duration of your aura has increased noticeably. The Emperor said to Paris, who was thinking about Florentia. Yes, right. It was ridiculously short to answer to the Emperor, but Jovane didn't mind. It was because his interest had focused on Paris' tremendous sword skills. When he first read the report brought by the swordsman teacher to the chief of staff, Jovane doubted his eyes. At the age of 13, Paris already capable of maintaining aura for an hour. Until recently, there had not been such an achievement in the history of the empire. At the age of 13, it was the age where talent is assessed by following physical and basic training. A similar example was Astana, the first prince. Astana, who has been holding swords from a much younger age than Perez, recently finished basic training at the age of 15 and had just started a theory class for aura. Very fast progress. Looking at Astana, the nobles of the empire were saying the future of the imperial family is bright. Until now, Perez's achievements were known only as Jovanes and his swordsmanship teacher. No, the swordsmanship teacher from the beginning was recommended by Lombardi, so Lulak also receiving the reports. But except for them, Perez was still a forgotten prince. It was completely different from Astana, which was receiving the attention of the nobles every step of the way. Only they knew the existence of Perez. Perez put down the spoon at Jovane's call. Attend this imperial banquet. Perez's red eyes looked at the emperor with doubts. Jovanes looked at those eyes and wondered if Perez's mother, whose face no longer remembered, had those red eyes. I don't think it's a good idea. What came out after a moment of silence was rejection. Jovanes was confused. He not even thinking that Perez would reject the emperor ordered. Perez had lived in a hidden place so far. Jovanes thought he would be happy to finally jump on the chance to come out to the sun. Although there usually isn't much expression on Perez's face, there was a sign of annoyance now. You are someone who can be recognized as the second prince, Jovanes said as the last warning. Do I need approval? What? Even when Jovanes asked again, Perez stubbornly shut his mouth without explaining any further. The emperor looked at it and muttered to himself, You boy, you resemble me. In a moment, Perez's eyes were overwhelmed by unpleasant displeasure, but Jovanes, who was absorbed in his own thoughts, continued to talk without seeing it. Yeah, you are my blood, without the recognition of the nobles. You are the second prince of the Lambru Empire. The recognition Perez spoke of was not just the recognition of the nobles, as Jovanes understood it. It meant that no need Emperor's recognition too. In fact, it's been less than 3 years since the Emperor began to care if Perez was alive or dead. Before that, Perez was thrown to the Empress, hoping to die. Maybe the Emperor wished that his overnight mistakes would disappear like that. However, Jovanes seems to have taken it in a very different way. That's Perez tried to correct the misunderstanding but was interrupted by the Emperor's words. But the nobles need to know that Astana is not the only prince who is recognized by the Emperor. Astana. Perez's eyes changed at the name of the first prince. Jovanes, who noticed it, laughed wildly. Yes, you seem to agree with that. In fact, it's better to stay hidden for a few more years if it's entirely in Perez's interests. Astana's maternal mother and Jenna's enormous power, Perez couldn't allow it. Although Perez had Lulak Lombardi as his guardian, it was only the deal between the Emperor and Lulak, so it's good to keep quiet as is and develop more strength on your own. But that's only the way for Perez. That wasn't the way for Jovanes. Imperial banquet has a special meaning in many ways. Since ancient times, not long ago, Angenes offered 10 gold bars. It was an action taken by Angenes to check Perez's existence and make him visible to Jovanes. Angenes, who would have to pay attention if Perez was at Imperial banquet this time. More than just 10 gold bars. It's even more, special this year. Gallian Lombardi is going to be admitted to receive the medals, so the nobles who attend the banquet will be the same as usual. I will attend, Perez said at that moment. Until a while ago, it was a bright face, but now it shines from the eyes. You seem to be greedy. Jovanes nodded and wiped his mouth with a napkin. It was because he didn't even think that Perez would change his attitude like a thunderbolt just by hearing the name Gallian Lombardi. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The day of the Imperial founding banquet. I got ready with Lauren's help. Yes, this is it. I laughed with satisfaction when I moved my body in front of the mirror. Wow, Miss is so cute. Right? Usually kids my age hate when adults say cute. But no matter what they think, if I look cute to an adult, it doesn't matter. It's adults who buy children's clothes. To promote the children's clothing launch this time, the dress I chose was a gentle brown dress. It's a style that adults love to wear to their children, which makes my green eyes stand out and look neat. But that wasn't all. An off-white silk blouse was worn inside the monochromatic dress, and green silk embroidered with colorful flowers in gold was stitched along the hem of the brown dress. A fine emerald was attached to the brown fabric, which could seem flat. A rosario made of silver, whose thicker than the finger joints, was used to tie the waist once to make the dress more voluminous. In addition, the sleeves are decorated with round white lace, which makes it gorgeous and beautiful dress that cannot be thought of as a ready-made dress. Although the beginning was similar to others, it was the charm of ready-to-wear that could change into a unique look by showing the desired accessories and each fashion sense. Of course, the point here is that everyone knows what a monotonous ready-made suit looks like. People need to know the prototype so that people can know how expensive jewelry I used and how I changed it to a pretty design with an aesthetic sense. It was a good material to stimulate the competitive spirit of the nobles who like to show off anything, have a lot of money, time, and a little work to do. End of chapter 54. Chapter 55. Perfect. I had put a hairpin made of a very bright red ruby in the half-hair bundle that L'Oreal carefully braided, so my appearance in the mirror was cute, even to me. It was a perfect banquet dress with Lombardy's wealth combined with my father's ready-to-wear clothing at Gallihan clothing store. How about L'Oreal? Does it look expensive? Miss, do you know how much this emerald on this one is? Maybe no one at today's banquet is dressed as good as Miss. That's it. To change the perception that ready-to-wear is cheap, it was deliberately decorated more colorfully. Ah, I can die now. L'Oreal touched my elaborate hair more carefully and said excitedly, I saw my young lady grow up like this and go to a banquet. Someone will think you raised me, but I also laughed when I knew L'Oreal's heart caring for me. You're so pretty today. Is there going to be an uproar at the banquet? It's not that much. Don't overdo it. No, you don't know how pretty you are. That's cuter, but L'Oreal looked at me as if she wanted to bite me while saying, ooh, in addition, today is the day when when you first appear outside, isn't it? Is it? Then it turned out that L'Oreal was right. Unlike my cousins who regularly attend banquets here and there, even before making their official social debut, I have never attended such an event. My father wasn't really interested in that, and he's been so busy lately that I barely see his face. Although Shannon had suggested that we go together, there were many times that he refused. Miss Lorraine has made her social debut a while ago. Lombardi's lady has a good look, that it's not really because I have you. Miss, after all, our Miss is much prettier and cuter than Miss Lorraine. L'Oreal sighed deeply, saying it's so regrettable that I can't see it in person. Afterwards, we'll have to go to the banquet all together. Well, at the words I threw, a white smile blossoms on L'Oreal's face. That's right, it will. Finally, after looking in the mirror and checking again, I left the room. In the parlor, my father and grandfather were waiting for me while drinking tea. Miss is ready to go. The two of them looked up at L'Oreal's voice, and wow, my father looked at me and closed his mouth. Grandfather, sitting next to me, frowned. It wasn't surprising that his wrinkles were deep in the eyebrows. But L'Oreal said I was pretty. What? Laurel said I was pretty. I felt anxious. Dad, grandfather, the two began to move. Tia! My father ran and hugged me. It was a mysterious face that seemed to cry and laugh at any moment. My daughter is so pretty. It wasn't my mistake. My father's voice was definitely crying. I lifted myself and looked at my father's face. My father's eyes were clearly looking at me. I could feel it from the gaze that hovered around the outline of my face, and from the gaze that looked deeply into my eyes. Now my father is seeing my mother in my face. It's not in my memory, but for my father, it's a face that's as clear as yesterday's memory. If you are still like this, it will be worth seeing later when your child debuts in the social circle. My grandfather approached with his back and said jokingly when he saw my father, So, social debut, suck. My father, who was barely calming down, got up, turned his back, and finally grabbed the eyebrows. Florentia, grandfather came to my father's place, and he still spoke with a wrinkled eyebrow. If you go to the banquet today, you'll be next to his grandfather or Galyahan. Yes, grandpa. If weird guys come and talk to you, just ignore it. Yes, grandfather. Yes? It's a little weird to answer with the habit of nodding my head. But if you're bothered, kick it with your feet. Leave the cleaning up to this grandfather. And there is a small murmur. Hey, Tia, so cute. Tia looks so cute. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. At the same time, Pyrak Palace, Caitlin and Kylus, who accompanied Perez, exchanged eyes silently. This is when everyone is sleepy after lunch. As always, Perez holding a book open, but the atmosphere was different. Kylus looked at Perez, who had been nervous since morning, with anxious eyes. If you ask Perez with that expressionless face is nervous about waiting for something. Kylus grabbed the bookshelf, which had already been motionless for an hour. Caitlin also looked at him and said, quietly approaching, Dear Prince, if you feel uncomfortable like that, why not go out for a while and come for a walk? There is still a long time until sunset when the banquet begins. Kylus also helped. Or maybe I'll order your favorite chocolate cookie? Eventually, the book Perez was held close with a dull sound. It's tense? Yes. Ooh. Perez sighed as he touched the corner of the book, Brown Swordsmanship. It's normal to be nervous. It's your first time officially attending the banquet. Kylus comforted Perez. He was 13 years old and had little agitation, but today was the day that anyone could be nervous about. In fact, it's called National Founding Banquet, but there's nothing special about it. You just have to come with your majesty and show your face in return. I and Kylus will be right by your majesty's side. How burdensome will it be? Previously, his existence had been forgotten, and now for the first time he had to stand in front of the people as the second prince of the Lambru Empire Kingdom. It was a burden for the young prince to endure it alone. Perez, who was looking at the sad faces of those two people, said, "I'm not worried about the banquet." "Well then, are you worried about Her Majesty the Empress?" Caius asked, carefully. It was the only thing he could think of. Was there anything else that could make the second prince nervous besides the Empress? Now he knew too. Why did young Perez remain alone in the separate palace, and how it was when they first met. Fortunately, after moving to Perak Palace, Perez never met the Empress. The Empress still treated Perez as an absent person and excluded Perez from all imperial ceremonies. What was different from the past was that Perez was living in Perak Palace instead of a separate palace, and that he was properly educated and cared for as prince instead of a neglected person. So for Perez, the only schedule as an imperial family was to eat with the emperor once a month. Her Majesty the Empress may not know that the prince is attending the banquet, but even so, she is not a reckless person in front of everyone's eyes. Not that either. Perez shook his head, said Caitlin, who was worried. The prince then, please tell us what is uncomfortable, and we will. Tia, yeah? Tia is coming to the banquet. Perez, who threw the word, opened the book again and lowered her head. His ears were red, which could be seen between her fine black hair. So Caius couldn't believe his ear and asked, "It's not because of the banquet who attended hundreds of nobles, and not because of seeing the Empress again. Are you saying you're nervous about me meeting Lady Florentia?" Perez's head nodded once, and he said in a small voice, "It's been a while since I've seen her. Perez, who answered so, hiding behind the book again. The book was still there until it was time to leave for the banquet hall. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. We arrived at the Imperial Palace on our grandfather's special Lombardy carriage. Emperor Jovanes will show the luxury of the imperial family this time, and the scale of the national founding banquet was different. Unlike previous years when the Emperor's Palace and the Empress' Palace were used, this year a whole large separate palace was decorated for a banquet. The bright lights of the banquet hall were visible from afar. It was spectacular to see the carriage of nobles present in the road from the main gate of the Imperial Palace to the banquet hall. However, the carriage with the emblem of Lombardy ignored all the long lines and stopped in front of the banquet hall as quickly as it was running on the highway. While the coachman was preparing the carriage's footrests, I looked out the window and realized one thing. I'm sure Lombardy is amazing. If they were invited to the imperial banquet, they would be noble families with their own power. And how much was everyone ready to come to the imperial palace? However, their carriage was shabby compared to the Lombardy carriages. Not just the size, it doesn't even look very sturdy. Just before the carriage door opened, my grandfather turned to me and said, "Remember what your grandfather said. Just kick it with your feet." "Yes, Tia. And call Dad too." Now, my father has even joined grandfather. Fortunately, our conversation ended when the coachman opened the door. First, my grandfather got off, followed by my father, and I got off with my father's escort in the last. When I stepped on the ground, I heard a melodious melody of music flowing from inside the banquet hall with the cool night air. In fact, it is my first time in my whole life that I have attended this grand banquet. It was true that I was a little nervous. I walked with my father's hand on one hand and my grandfather's hand on the other. That was it. It wasn't because someone announced our arrival with a loud voice. It was just a few steps away. But every time we took a step, a change occurred. One person, two at a time. They looked at us as if there were rumors about us. And by the time we arrived at the door of the banquet hall, everyone's eyes were focused on us. End of chapter 55.